All right. Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brame. Something Positive for Positive People is a 501c3 nonprofit organization supporting people who are navigating herpes stigma. In addition to that, we also teach people how to communicate about their sexual health. And that this episode is going to highlight that in more of a hands-on personal experience based process. I got a guest on here, Tamar Weir, who is you manage the Instagram account Pomegranate Pleasure. Is that right?
It is right. Hi.
Yeah. And I don't really have announcements, so we can really just go into the recording. So I talked about this on a previous episode. I just didn't say who or like give any like details outside of that. But I did an episode speaking about possible exposure to ureaplasma. And I really, really highlighted the communication and just like thought about how grateful I was to like have someone who, all right, I was exposed to this. Let me tell all of my partners, hey, this is a thing. Here, be mindful of it. Here's the information. And then the way that you presented it, not being something that was overly positive or overly like in a fearful way or anything. It was just a
Mhm.
very neutral presentation of the information and what, suggested next steps were. So that was kind of what I talked about in the podcast of how it was for me receiving that information. And
Mhm.
so I guess to start, and I'll talk about the ureaplasma, what it is and all of that. We'll get into it. But for starters, let's open up with the communication and your experience, since the audience knows mine if they listen to that episode.
Yeah. Yeah. So the communication is definitely part of my passion in this like sexual health and sensuality work. I talk about it a lot. I think it's generally a topic that a lot of people are talking about. Whether or not people are actually doing it or not, I don't know. It's like a separate podcast, perhaps. Um, but yeah, I feel like for me personally, whenever I'm exploring something new within my own experience, there's always a certain level of whether like, perhaps anxiety or just newness to a situation that really I like to look at as like an opportunity to practice something. And from our past podcasts and folks who know me, communication around like sexual desires and STI status and all that good stuff is not something that is new for me, or unfamiliar, but ureaplasma was. And so that is where kind of the two things came together, where maybe I may be more familiar with having these hard conversations than other people, but it was an opportunity to do it in a different or new way because ureaplasma was something that was not very familiar to me. So that's kind of like the background headspace that I was in, was, curious, confused, and also just seeing it as like an opportunity to keep exploring this, whether or not it's through my work or like my own personal experience with my body and my partners.
Yeah, out of curiosity, was this something that, because you wrote about it and I read the blog, very
Yes.
well written. Thank you for sharing. Um, was this re-triggering, and I use triggering very loosely, let's call it activating for you,
Mhm.
from having your herpes experience and then talking about that and now sharing about another STI?
Mhm. Yeah, actually it wasn't as much as I thought it would or could be. I think that unlike I think for the main reason why it didn't kind of resurface some old feelings, was because when I got herpes, I was very young and there was a lot of fear and like misinformation and stigma that still exists now. But I was a lot younger. I was like 18, and just, yeah, very, very young. And so I think when I had herpes, I was just flooded with a lot of fear because of the heavy stigma that was around me. And now, like almost 10 years later, there is still so much stigma, but I feel a lot more sure of myself. And so I feel like that stigma doesn't penetrate me as easily as it did before it was like full on, chaos. And so, and also I think it didn't resurface any old feelings because of what I'm studying now and focusing on, and because I think ureaplasma is still a very confusing bacteria. Um, so, when there is confusion about things, I think sometimes the stigma is a little different. I mean, of course, people are still, I see in my life, very confused by herpes, but I think it's a little different than ureaplasma. We can get into the specifics of maybe the differences and whatnot, but I'm curious about you. Did it resurface anything or prompt any old thoughts and feelings you had, or was it completely new or like a mix?
Ureaplasma was very similar of an experience because I didn't know anything about it,
Mm,
right? And I think that what was familiar for me more than anything was having to navigate the conversation with other partners and being more concerned with how would a newer person who maybe doesn't know me all that well, like, what would they think?
yeah.
And if you let yourself get into the thought process and go down a rabbit hole of
Hmm.
possibilities, like, you can really mind fuck yourself. So
Yeah.
for me, it was just a matter of, okay, let me go ahead and just, I got the information, like, the sooner the better. I
Yeah.
would rather know in an instance like that, like, I'd want to know now,
Yeah.
especially before if I engage with anybody else, especially if I know that the people that I see other people. So
Yeah.
for me, it was just a matter of, okay, hey, I got this information today and I just wanted to share it with you. I don't know I don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get tested. It was very similar to the text that you sent. It was just a lot shorter, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was really the only thing. It was just like,
Mm.
damn, I gotta tell, people, and I don't know how their reactions are gonna go. But it was a real good litmus test for the quality of and the kind of people that I do have sex with and communicate with, because no one said to me
Hmm.
like the worst possible things that I think people imagine that are going to be
Yeah.
said. I've
Mm.
never been met with those things. And I think
Amazing.
for a regular person who may look from the outside in and be like, well, Courtney, you're in sex education. You know what to say. It ain't always what you say, but it's
Mm.
like also how it's being said. It's where
Yeah.
the other person is, the context of the relationship, how they
Yeah.
receive it, what kind of mood they're in. Are they hungry? Are they hot? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had some initial like rockiness going into it, but then as it
Mhm.
became more of a conversation, I think I became a lot more comfortable.
Yeah. And did you, yeah, I get that. Did you feel like you had to have a lot of conversations and through the ureaplasma, moment?
No. So the conversations I had, I reached out to two of my board members who are in sexual health,
Mm.
because one of them had just treated someone for it. And she was like, yo, that is a bitch. And I was like, what do you mean? And so she
Yeah.
was explaining to me how long it takes for the test results to get back, the treatment turnaround time. And then another board member had another, she shared as well, like what her experience was with it in the space. And she was like, yeah, it's a colonizer, which
Yeah.
I don't know what that means in
It's
terms
a
of
tricky one.
STIs.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. But yeah, I got that information and I was just like, okay. And then when I went and saw my doctor, I talked about this already, but like my doctor didn't
Yeah.
even want to say the word penis. So I was just
Oh,
like, oh, that's the kind of care I'm in today. The
right.
nurse was much more comfortable talking about sex. And I was asking her like 5 questions. And then I was like, I'm supposed to ask these to the doctor, aren't I? She was like, yes. I said, okay.
Mm.
And the way she looked was kind of like, oh, you're in for a treat
Yeah.
because he doesn't know anything. But
Yeah. And he did not
yeah,
even say the word penis.
he could have said anything, but
Yeah.
he chose to say nothing. So he was explaining to me how to do the urine test for
Mhm.
ureaplasma. And he was like, yeah, you want to take the cup and we want to
Mhm.
do a clean swab. So what you'll
Mhm.
do is you'll wipe and then pee in the cup. And I think I made this face.
Mhm.
I don't think a
Yeah,
sound came out, but I just
yeah,
like went, I'm leaving
uh,
you a review,
uh,
sir.
yeah,
So I did it, but when I came back, he was very confident. I don't know. I don't want to use the word knowledgeable, but he was very
mm,
confident in presenting the information. So I don't know if there's like a medical chat GPT or
mm,
something that he brushed up on real quick,
quick.
but he was on it.
Okay.
And all of his responses were confusing because he said
Yeah,
like you can have it and not know it. There cannot be it
yeah,
can show up without symptoms. It can go away on its own,
right.
and it's one of the tricky ones to get tested for.
Yeah, yeah.
That was all the information that I got. And I was like,
Okay.
well, why isn't this on the test? Like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah,
Give me more information. So I left out of there with probably more questions than answers that I had.
yeah. Did you feel like when you were there at the clinic, uh, you were more confused? You said you left with more questions. Did you get, I mean, it sounds like you got some important information, but what do you feel like? Were you left with like a lot of question marks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was really just a waiting game because the
Mm,
test took 10 to 14 days. So I'm just like, do I take the medication now? Like, do I assume that I have it? Like, what do
mhm.
I do? And it was just like, well, we don't know. It can go away on its own. So I was like, well, fuck, I don't want to take medication for something I don't have. So all right, I'll just wait the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was
Hmm.
the process for me. It was just a matter of, oh, I have to wait on this. And then that was it.
Yeah. It's a long waiting game.
I know, and I can't imagine what it was like for you. I mean,
Yeah.
we communicated throughout the process, but how are
Yeah.
you? And if you're comfortable with just sharing what that journey was for you from the time that you found out or you had symptoms, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's been a long journey and still one that is in process. The blog that I wrote last week was just a way of kind of condensing the process for me that I've been in.
And I'll
As
be sure to link that. I'll link that in the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been, I mean, I've been talking to you about the confusion of it and sending little updates here and there because it has been such a long process that has required, a good amount of patience, which is hard for me. So I've been, working on that personally. But yeah, I have been going through some other, urethral and vaginal pain that is could be connected, but for the sake of this conversation, maybe a little disconnected from ureaplasma alone. But that's actually what led me to get tested for ureaplasma was that I was and still am having some urethral symptoms. And I get regularly tested, usually like every 3 months, sometimes sooner, depending on the context or who I'm with. And that's pretty routine for me. So pretty standard, pretty easy. But I had a new doctor who is a urologist. So it was like a specialist that I had requested to see for some other concerns that I've been having. Um, and in one of our first meetings, after telling him a little bit about what I was experiencing, he suggested that I get tested for some like weirder STIs. And I talk about that in the blog and kind of criticize a little bit and critique him because he's not my favorite doctor. I will say definitely not recommending him. But once I spoke to him and kind of was like, what do you mean by that? Let's unpack it a little. He recommended that I get tested for ureaplasma and mycoplasma. Um, and once I got tested for those, my urine culture sample came back positive. And then from there, I went into a discussion with him. But again, my doctor, maybe similar to yours, didn't really give me a lot of information. If anything, my doctor gave me even less than yours. Um, because we did an online appointment. So a lot of appointments now, I think in like the healthcare system are online. It's like a lot of efficiency. So I didn't even really see him. I actually still have not seen him in person. So yeah, like the information he gave me was very like just confusing and not very clear. And so, yeah, I got the test. It was positive. I was trying to ask him about what he thinks and kind of like a larger framework for this. But basically, he was like, this is your only option is to, do this antibiotic treatment. And so that is what I did. It was a pretty standard, like 10-day antibiotic treatment. And, after that, you're supposed to wait a given amount of time, right, to get retested. Every STI is different. The window of testing and waiting, is unique to each one. But even that, as I was doing my own research and speaking with people in like my community and trying to gather information for my blog and just for my own healing, like I really had to do most of the research and the digging, which was frustrating because, we and I want to be able to, really trust and like lean on providers, and not have to like carry that weight alone. But this doctor did not really carry anything in this journey, really. He's just kind of like there. But yeah, after I got the treatment, I still was feeling like I had symptoms. So I was kind of, curious as to what my test would be. Um, and I waited a few weeks and then got retested and it came back negative. But while I was doing all of that, I was, disclosing to people, having conversations, and then doing quite a bit of research for my own self just to kind of really like understand this bacteria at in a more intimate way,
Yeah, and it's a good point for me to define what ureaplasma is. It
Yeah.
says here on Google AI mode, ureaplasma is a group of microscopic bacteria that naturally live in the human respiratory and urogenital tracts. For
Yeah.
most people, these bacteria are completely harmless. Commensals,
Mhm.
commensals, I don't know how to say that. I've never seen this word before. Meaning they exist in a peaceful balance with the rest of the body's microbiome without causing any symptoms. However, if the bacteria multiply excessively and cause an overgrowth, or if a person has a compromised immune system, they can act as opportunistic pathogens and lead to localized infections.
Yeah.
So,
The thing about it is, yeah, is that like it is a commensal bacteria, which means that it can live inside the body, inside of a urogenital tract without causing like disturbance or like symptoms or any harm necessarily. So commensal means that when there is an opportunity, it's like an opportunistic bacteria. So when there's an opportunity for it to grow, then it will. If everything is healthy, the pH and all of these things are in balance, then it won't grow, right? This bacteria will just stay at like a base level. And that's why I feel like even the information that I was given was very confusing. Um, because unlike other STIs that, need to be treated immediately and are, it's the best when they are treated immediately, ureaplasma is a little different because it can live inside like a healthy body, right? Without causing disturbance. But it can also live and cause disturbance, right? And symptoms as well. Um, and so yeah, it's definitely a more nuanced bacteria, right?
yeah. And as I, look at this, what comes to mind is something that I've talked about in the past now, where I think that the way that we view viruses, bacteria, parasites, and fungi is
Mhm.
so disconnected. Like we associate it with filth and dirtiness and a lack of cleanliness when
Yeah.
it says it right here that it just lives there and presents
Yes.
no symptoms like a lot of different things and organisms do. And it's
Hmm.
like no harm, no foul until things are off balance. And essentially, the bacteria is doing the same shit that we do to the earth. Like we eat, we populate, we shit, we create waste. And if that happens too fast in a
Hmm.
small localized area, boom, we
Hmm.
get inflammation, we get
Yeah. True.
the spreading of the thing, we get swelling, we get pain,
Yeah.
we get symptoms that just
Right.
basically says, all right, now we got to treat this thing.
Yeah.
So being able to more so, I don't want to say humanize bacteria necessarily,
Mm.
but look at just how similar it behaves. Like we have this whole ecosystem that is in, on, around our bodies.
Yeah.
And people are so quick to call themselves or others dirty or like
Yeah.
reckless. And I think that that's one of those things that perpetuates stigma is the
For
language that
sure.
we use and the untruthfulness of what it means to live with a virus or bacteria
Totally.
or to have an infection. It's like, okay, now you know, let's get it treated or manage it. And that's really
Yeah.
all that it takes.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, definitely to bring into the conversation. Um, Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of fear comes into. Of course, there's like the spectrum and the levels of fear that are, important in this discussion too. But I think one element for sure is like the element that the dirtiness because of this like stigma around cleanliness, right, and bacteria. I think that is definitely an element that brings fear when it could be different, you know what I mean? Like it's a lot of, yeah, bacteria isn't inherently a bad thing, you know what I mean? And so I think that that can be definitely a lot more of a nuanced conversation. And it's sad to see that it oftentimes isn't, you know what I mean? Especially like in these types of conversations, right? Because bacteria is not unique to STIs, right? So bacteria is like a larger thing. And then it enters into, right, the STI and sexual world too. So yeah, definitely a good point to bring into the conversation.
Yeah, I thought I was about to enter like some beef online with somebody who
Yeah.
called herpes a parasite. And I was like, bro,
Mm,
herpes does not behave like a parasite.
yeah.
Parasites thrive at the expense of their host's health. Like
Yes.
I had to explain that. And fortunately, the back and forth explanation was healthy and we got
Okay.
to do it online and people were able to
Nice.
see that. But usually that ain't the case. Like people aren't, if a lot of times I think people online just want to be the last one to get, they're going to get the last word. They want
I
to just
know.
be the loudest and just
I
be
know.
saying shit. So
Yeah.
this was pleasant. I was very happy with that engagement.
Hell yeah.
Um, all right. So I want to make a clean transition. It's been a while since I interviewed anybody on the podcast. I'm like, well, am
It's
I doing this
June.
right? Yeah.
It's officially summer in 20 days, so
Um,
we're in a new moment.
we are.
Yeah.
It's been at least a season.
There you go.
Yeah, I think it would have been pre March,
Hmm.
maybe. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm out of practice.
Yeah, it's okay. We
But
can we can workshop it. I'll give you a stack for that transition.
nah, well, let's go ahead and go into. So we talked about ureaplasma, we talked about the treatment, we
Hmm.
talked about like your experience, and then what my experience was. Um, for you having to initiate the conversation and the communication, like I know you said you're used to this,
Yeah.
but you and I are both in the field of sex education, so we're a little bit more familiar with that. This is a normal conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know uh, if you and I having the conversation or you initiating the text that you did with me, like, would it be a little bit different if it were someone not in the space or not familiar with or having the same comfort level with
Mhm.
sexual health, STIs? I don't know if that
Yeah.
question's making sense.
I get it. I
Okay.
get it. Yeah, I think it's important to for each person to discern like who they're speaking to and how they want to speak to that person, right? I think like any level, like a high level of respect and care should be included, of course. And like each person you're talking to, you have a different relationship with. They have, you have a different connection with them. You have a unique experience with them, perhaps. So I think that like each conversation can be a little different and shouldn't be necessarily always the same. And I think it's actually really hard to have the same conversation with different people because we're different. Um, but yeah, I think when I started the conversation with you, um, it felt pretty natural to me. I think that because you're also in the sexual health and education kind of umbrella, I had more trust that you would be able to receive that information. Um, because of the work that you do and your own personal life and how you connect the work you do to like, your life. And so I felt very calm, like disclosing that information and having that conversation via text. And I think that with other people in my life who are not, sexual educators or in this general work, um, there's also a level of trust, of course, because these people are in my life, but it is a little different, and I would navigate conversations a little bit differently. Um, yeah, depending on each person and my connection with them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because I think that's important too, right? Like we were talking a little bit before this. It may not always be like what you say, but how you say it too,
Yeah,
and the
true.
different relationships being important to the conversation. And I talk to a lot of people who want to know how to disclose in the sense of
Yeah,
what do I say? And
yeah,
after having a little bit of back and forth curiosity, where I'm like, okay, well, what's your relationship to the person?
yeah,
How do y'all communicate? How'd y'all
right.
meet? What do y'all do? And over time, they say exactly what it is that they need to
Mhm.
say to the person, which is always beautiful because I'm not
Yeah,
giving people a script
right.
to share this information.
Yeah,
But it's more so just an acknowledgement of what the relationship is, the person that you're talking to, and delivering the
yeah,
information to them the way that y'all interact.
right. I think, yeah, having like a sense of authenticity, and making the conversation feel like more like you is always helpful for me. And so I think it can be helpful for other people. I think that definitely though, like I have a lot of people in my life who do want maybe a script or just want to feel more confident having these conversations. And I do think that having like little mock scripts is always helpful and makes it a little more
What you
playful.
mean? Yeah, what you mean like a little box script? Can you give an
Like,
example?
I remember in the beginning of my journey, before, I was studying and in the work that I am in now, just when I was, 18-year-old, 19-year-old me, just living life and having my, sexual endeavors. Um, I was a very sexual person and I wanted to explore a lot and I was naturally curious about a lot. And so I would have a lot of conversations and, had a lot of experiences. And I feel like I made little scripts for myself because I didn't know anybody who had herpes at the time. I knew maybe like one person. Um, and most of the people that I was having sex with didn't have herpes or any STI. So I kind of felt alone in the journey. Um, and so I would make myself little scripts and then, sometimes I'd practice them. Sometimes I would edit them. Sometimes I didn't have a script and in the moment, of course, just, what would come out came out. But I do think that it kind of helped me refine like what words I like to use and that feel good for me, not necessarily in a way where it's like a copy paste and now I'm not like letting myself be authentic for like what I want to say in the moment, but more as a way of like um yeah, like when you're in theater and you have a little script and then you go off script a little, but you have a little like base template to like make you feel good and you can choose what you want to include on the script. It's can be empowering because it's not like somebody's giving you a script and you're forced to read it. It's more like you are creating the script. And I think that that can be useful for people who are less familiar with these conversations, who struggle getting words out, who struggle with communication. So it's an idea. It's served me in different moments of my life for sure.
Yeah. I never thought about that. Like I think I've always been the kind of person to just like I'm gonna do the thing and
Yeah.
then adjust for next time. And that shit got me in trouble, actually,
Yeah.
now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
But because you can recalibrate in such an extreme to where, right, the way that I deliver information to one person they'd be like, I wish you would have done it this way. And I'm like, all right, bet,
Mhm.
moving forward, I'll deliver it this way. But then the next person you deliver the information to wishes that you would
Right.
have done it the original way. And authenticity being the word that you use, right?
Yeah.
I see the importance of that, the
Yeah.
importance of, hey, there's no right or wrong. There's real and not real
Right.
in this context, right? Like, we're not talking about ethics. We're talking about in delivering the information. You can
Yeah.
do it in an authentic way or an inauthentic way. And so
Right.
the only wrong way is to deliver it in a way that's not true to you. And if you're somebody who, you use certain words, right? And
Mhm.
the relationship, you may
Yeah.
say it a little bit differently, right? So
Right.
um yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate that offering.
Yeah.
So there's a perspective that
Yeah.
is helpful to anybody who likes scripts.
Yeah, and, like, also too, I think, um, when I say scripts, I don't mean to, like, universalize anything, like, I think that's not useful for anyone. Of course, like, the way you speak is gonna be different than the way I speak because of our identities that we hold, the way we even view language, the languages we may even know, like, it goes deep, and so scripts can I when I say scripts, I really do mean like, take what serves you and leave what doesn't. Because if I were to create a script and you were to read it, you might be like, oh, this is a great script for you, but like, why would I say this? You know what I mean? And I'm sure the way that I speak is not the way that speak. And so if you were to make a script for me, maybe there are some pieces that I would, relate to and others that I wouldn't. So scripts can be edited.
Yeah. All right. So if somebody wants to make their own script, where should they start?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this and writing this, reflecting about this a little bit in my blog about, ureaplasma and then, right, disclosing and the conversation and, when it happens via text versus in person and all of those elements. And yeah, I think that disclosing any sort of change in our body can be anxiety producing or, can create complicated feelings, whether that's a new pain that we have or something even maybe beautiful and more positive or, an STI, right? So I think anytime there's a change, there, is just newness, right? And I know that like in my disclosure journey, I have edited and come a long way in the types of conversations that I have with people, and how I engage in these conversations. And just like you said, there's no like right way to do it. Of course, there are some ways that are very hurtful and disrespectful, and like, there's certain elements that are, I think, like important to add into a conversation, but I don't really think there is one right way, like you said, to have these conversations. Um, and yeah, I think that in making a script, what I like to think about is my personality. I like to think about the experiences I've had. I like to think about like what identities I hold because all of these things already naturally influence the work that I do and how I move every day. And I think that's the beauty of people holding identities and having these identities mix, right? And so I would, yeah, just like sit down and be like, okay, what are a few words I would use to describe my personality, Am I naturally more like spunky and talk in this kind of way? Am I naturally a little bit more shy and quiet? Or, like what are some ways, that you could describe your personality? Like I would start there and then, talk and think through maybe some experiences I've had that are like notable that come to mind, some identities that I hold that are, relevant and like just kind of let all of those things sit together and then be like, what could I make from this, And so an example of that, let's say, is an example that I don't do anymore, but my old script, just for like inspo or just to kind of visualize, I guess, was when I was younger, um, I identified as fully extroverted, like very spunky, very like outgoing. So that would be like the personality element, right? Of like, okay, I know that I have conversations usually with that in mind and people like can feel that, right? And then I had some identities that I was holding at the time, right? Of being a highly sexual person at the time and really wanting to explore, but also this new identity of having herpes and feeling, shame. And I had a lot of other identities, being a woman and amongst many other things. So I was holding all of that in there as well. And I also had the more personal, emotional identity of being like the caretaker in a lot of dynamics. And that came into play when I had conversations of any kind often. And so that my beginning script that I would often do was like, in the very beginning of the conversation, it would be like very spunky and outgoing and very like talkative. I'd bring that like personality into it. And then towards the middle, when I started getting into the like, okay, I have herpes and the kind of the shame and that kind of new identity would get brought in somehow into the conversation, and the stigma would come in there, and then I would put on that caretaker role and like really jam pack the conversation with like all the facts and all the details as a way to like be caring for the other person and really like putting them above me in a way of like what they might need in the conversation, right? So like really giving all the facts and all the resources and like everything you may need to know, and even about me, just like spilling so much, right? So I give this example not as like something that I do now, but as, holding tenderness for a script that I did have that worked for me at the time because of what I was exploring at the time. That felt authentic to me in the moment. If I were to do that now, it wouldn't feel, but again, even authenticity comes in waves and like we change all the time as people. So
I remember an old text that I've sent and
yeah.
like parts of it. And it's funny in hindsight, I'd never use
Yeah.
it again, but I remember I talked about it in the No Shame in This Game documentary, and it
Yeah.
always gets a good chuckle. But I used to send a text and be
Yeah.
like, all right, hey, before you fall madly in love with me, I
Yeah.
got something I need to tell you. I need to tell you I got herpes.
Okay.
Right? Because I'm such an awesome person. And I want you to be able to make that decision from a place of like
Mm-hmm.
not being madly in love with me.
Mm,
And on one hand, it's like, oh, this is a confident ass person. But then on the other hand, I'm like offering this as a disclaimer in a
right.
way. And it
Yeah.
made the process of initiating that discussion, right, feel like a disclosure. Like, we ain't signing legal
Yeah.
documents. And
No.
it always would make like a me versus you
Mm,
dynamic, when the reality is that we're talking about our sexual health together. So
right.
thinking about it as a conversation rather than a confession, or a discussion
Yes.
rather than a disclosure, is
Right.
how to make it a collaborative effort. It's me and you,
Yes.
collaborating with this event, which is our sexual
Right.
health.
Right.
Um, Checking in with you on time. How much
Yeah.
time you got so I can
Yeah.
begin to close this out?
I feel like I got a good 10-15 minutes. We can get
All right.
into some juicy things and then, 30-ish.
Yeah. Let's plan to close it out then at the top of, or the half, the 30, whatever the 30 is for you. Yeah.
30-ish. Yeah.
All right. Um, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we cover before like closing things out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we got into, the basics here. I'm curious about your yeah, you said that, I mean, in the beginning we talked a little bit about like our conversation. How do you feel as a sex educator, sexual health educator in the field, like receiving the text that I sent? And I don't know, I like what you just said about, it is a conversation, it's not a confession. Um, and I like the alliteration there. It's like the two C's. It's just, I really like that phrase. It's not a confession. Like, I don't know why we're all feeling like, and I've been there, it's no shame, but why it's like so confession based, I'm like, we're not out here confessing like it's co-created, you know what I mean? This is actually, co-created. And so yeah, how did you feel about my text, and how are you feeling now? And kind of, I guess this was about maybe a little over a month ago, month and a half ago. So yeah, just checking in.
Yeah. I appreciate that. The way that I felt about the communication, is that what you how I felt about the communication or how I felt, period? What you read?
In general, yeah, and then like
I
adding in like that we're, that we're both sexual health educators and all this stuff
yeah.
too, like adding that in there.
That's never happened where somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, I might have something, I might have exposed you to it. You should
Oh
get
no.
tested." I'm thinking about it now and I'm
Yeah.
running through, and no, it's just not happened.
Okay.
Um, I
First time.
remember, yeah. I've had people, tell me they have herpes first, and I always fuck with them about it.
Yeah.
Like, if I don't have to say anything first, especially if the person has no idea who I am,
Yeah.
I'm always like, "Oh, doesn't everybody have that?" Like, I'll just say something like that, and it's just a fun space to be in when you know someone doesn't know what I do or who I
Yeah.
am,
It's
or
different.
like, yeah, so I get to like play the role of a civilian in the sexual conversation space, and I'm not the
Yeah.
educator or the caretaker in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember having to have I can't even say the word, a chlamydia conversation with
Mm,
partners. And that was received well, but I expected that to be received poorly. And it makes me
yeah.
think like a lot of the people that I talk to have the expectation that when they tell someone they have herpes, that they're going to have a drink thrown in their face, that they're going to be blasted on the internet. And
Yeah.
that has literally never been my experience for as
Mm,
many times as I've told people that I have
yeah.
herpes, or even in sharing with somebody or my partners at the time that I had chlamydia,
Mm,
or even having to discuss ureaplasma.
right.
So there are three instances of this kind of discussion initiation
Yeah.
where nothing bad has happened. It's actually just led to, beautiful experiences
Mm,
later and
yeah.
conversations. And, you see that there can be healthy communication.
Yeah.
Um, so how I felt was like grateful, like the
Mm,
gratitude of being the kind of person that, all right, you feel like you can tell that to, because I think
yeah.
being a straight man, being a straight black man, let me say that, because I know
Mm,
that a lot of the people that I talk to who have experiences with straight black men, they're like, "Oh, I could never say that," or, "Oh, I didn't realize you were this open-minded." And I get a lot of those kinds of conversations
okay.
just because of the stigma stereotypes that come with being
Yeah.
a black man and the
Yeah.
expectations of not being able to communicate, I guess. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was just validating for me to be seen as a person that can be communicated with about something vulnerable. And
Yeah.
yeah, I was just grateful for it.
Yeah. Me as well.
Yeah.
Grateful for sure, grateful for sure. And I think it's very important, yeah, to acknowledge our identities and what people may project onto us because of that. Like I think that's very important in sex work and sexual health work and creating intimacy with others. It's like we all have different experiences, and because of that, people may project things onto us, like you just said, a lot of people don't assume maybe that you are going to be open about this because of the stereotypes of, being a black man who is, straight. And so it's like, what does it mean to hold that identity, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
As far as now, yeah, like having had the experience and just been on the other side of it and having the conversations with the other partners that I've had,
Yeah.
um, I feel, yeah, like I know a little bit more about something that I didn't know about. And
Hmm.
it's nice to be able to speak to it.
Yeah.
This thing that I had no idea existed. And I even had that come up in a conversation with someone. I was like, yeah, I was tested for these things. And yeah, ureaplasma as well recently. And a
Hmm.
lot of people don't know about that. And
I
it led
know.
to, oh, yeah, that one sucks. Like, I have
Mhm.
a friend who, and you'd be surprised at what happens when we
Yes.
initiate and invite these kinds of conversations into our life. Like,
Yeah.
everybody want to, everybody want to fuck, but don't nobody want to talk about fucking, right?
I
Like,
know. And that is an important piece that we can, I think, end today and really like discuss a little bit because, yeah, I noticed that a lot. I know we've talked about that a lot. And I think that like beyond like the accuracy of getting tested and like all of the like more logistical things that sometimes need to be included in these kinds of conversations, right? and like spreading and, you know, all of that. I think that there's also an element of, yeah, like connecting with people and having these conversations and just like doing it in a way that feels connected, right? Beyond giving the facts and the necessary info. It's like, oh, can we have these conversations before having sex that actually make us want to have sex, like that make us feel inspired, and it doesn't need to be a chore. And I feel like a lot of times, and I understand why it can feel like that, like it is heavy, and it's okay for it to be heavy, you know, it doesn't need to be light all the time, but like, can we make these conversations feel lighter when there is space for it to be lighter, and can we make them feel sexy? Because I don't know where along the way conversations, I guess, just got seen as not sexy. um and I've had people in my life who like have never had a conversation before sex, and I think a lot of people operate with that path, you know, where it's the conversation maybe is after, if anything. And I want conversations to be sexy for people, if that's what I'm here to do, you know what I mean? And I know that you agree with that,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I was laughing over here because I was thinking of when you said conversations happening after, because
Yeah,
like people will have sex and then like you had that post nut clarity, and you're like, oh shit, hey,
yeah,
you ain't got nothing, do you? Like, do you have anything after just
yeah,
not using a condom
right,
at all, right? Like now you
yeah,
want to have this conversation? Well, I don't know.
yeah,
So that was just why I was laughing if that shows up on the video. But
literally.
yes, the conversation doesn't need to be dreaded. I always say it can be playful, right?
Yeah,
Um, like you eat a lot of fruit, right? So it can
yeah.
be like, oh damn, I'm trying to be that fruit. What's up? Like, yeah, hey,
It
that
can be
fruit,
playful. It can
yeah,
be. And like discerning too, like if it doesn't have like not forcing it to be playful, if the energy of everybody involved is heavy that day, make it heavy. You know what I mean? But if the energy can be playful and it can be light, like it can go down that path. It doesn't need to be heavy because it is inherently a conversation about sex. You know what I mean? And yeah, like having these conversations is hard. I think that we both, you know, talk to folks in our work and that is echoed, right, in a lot of people's experiences. Um, but yeah, if I could help myself and help other folks, like I just would really love it if we could all, you know, as a community, as a society, be a little bit more open to saying things out loud, you know, to saying what we want out loud, right?
yeah. And that's it. Ah, yeah. More conversations can be had from this, but we closing out at that window. But yeah, speaking about not just the safety piece, but the pleasure piece,
Yeah.
sex is supposed to be fun, and I think people forget that.
Yes.
And roller coasters are fine. If you just like run on a roller coaster and you don't recognize the possible outcomes of what happens if you just run up the racks of the roller coaster, you might get hit. But
Yeah.
there's all these safety protocols that are in place, and they ask you to just strap up, put your belt on, and enjoy the ride, right?
Hmm.
So balancing out the spectrum of safety and pleasure. And I don't really like using the word safety because it
Yeah.
implies an inherent danger, but that's the
Mhm.
best word we got right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and language is important. So
True.
recognizing that safe sex is communicative sex,
Yeah.
and that is how we also begin to expand into that bubble of pleasure as well.
Yes.
So if I were to leave this off at any kind of
Mhm.
a note, I think it would be that safe sex is communicative sex. And
Mhm.
thank you for your communication.
You are welcome. Thank you for yours. And yeah, conversations can be sexy. I'll just leave it at that. They don't have to be, but they can be, you know?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
how can people connect with you?
Yeah, if people want to connect with me, they can follow me on Instagram at Pomegranate Pleasure, and reach out to me on there. They can read some of my blog, which is Everything Juicy. It's a Wix site. It's also linked on my Instagram, and they can find it through this podcast. Or if they want to email me, they can also email me as well. I have a email that is open to folks if they want to email me, and it is Pomegranate Pleasure TW for Tamar Weir at gmail.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank
All right.
you.
That concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People. Please like, rate, review, share, subscribe to this podcast, the newsletter as well. It's just, if you Google herpes newsletter, it's like the first thing that shows up. So you can be up to speed with our updates and events. August 30th, we have the Herpes Stigma Expo in New York City. So come through. We're going to be doing some yoga stuff to help with stigma. We're going to have guest speakers. We're going to have Jordan Jones, the podcast host of Vaginas, Vulvas, and Vibrators, who's going to do a fun pleasure-based activity for us. And then we'll do some role plays where people can get practice talking about their sexual health status with partners. We'll have some prizes and gift cards for people who want to be in our social media scripts. And yeah, we'll have food and it'll be a good time. All right. Until next time, y'all, stay present.